All right, let's continue, insha'Allah ta'ala, going over this Nukhbah. I ask Allah to make this easy for myself and for you. We're talking about the ta'an, which is the criticism of the narrator. The author says, ثُمَّ الْبِدْعَةِ, then there's heresy. إِمَّا بِمُكَفِّرٍ, it's either going to be for something that necessitates a charge of blasphemy, for sure necessitates a charge of blasphemy. أو بمفسق, or it's something that's going to only demand deeming him a major sinner, the heresy. So that's a document for you right there for deviant belief. It's not kufr. That's Ibn Hajar al-Asqalaniyy. ثم البدعة إما بمكفر أو بمفسق. That statement. Furthermore, the heresy would either be for something that demands deeming one a blasphemer, or deeming him a major sinner. فالأول لا يقبل صاحبها الجمهور. The first one, the one who has to be deemed the kafir, the majority do not accept this one as a narrator. والثاني يقبل, the second one is acceptable, يعني possibly. يقبل من لم يكن داعية في الأصح, whoever was not a propagator. This one can be acceptable according to what's most accurate. Here in the explanation, Imam Ibn Hajar, he says, بمكفر كأن يعتقد ما يستلزم الكفر, like for him to believe what demands or is necessarily blasphemy, what's necessarily blasphemy. So this is important now for some people who are talking about someone committed blasphemy or didn't commit blasphemy. Some things will necessarily make one a blasphemer. أو بمفسق, or what makes him a major sinner. He says, إلا إن روى ما يقوي بدعته, unless he narrated what supports his heresy. فيرد على المختار, then such a narrator would be rejected according to what's chosen. وبه صرح الجوزجاني شيخ النسائي. About that, Al-Jawzajani was explicit. He's the Shaykh of An-Nasa'i. You know who's Nasa'i? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Yes, he's one of the 6. Barakallahu feek. Yani Al-Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, An-Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah, the 6. 2 of them are the authors of Sahih, Al-Bukhari and Muslim. 4 of them are the authors of the Sunan, the other 4. He's the student, and Nasa'i is the student of this one that Ibn Hajar is citing. And Nasa'i is from the Salaf time. All those 6 Imams are from the Salaf. Ibn Hajar, he's from the Khalaf. It's not from the Salaf. Ibn Hajar is a later scholar. ثم سوء الحفظ, then there's bad memory. إن كان لازما فهو الشاذ على رأي. If this were one's normal case, then his narration is irregular according to an opinion. Or if it's incidental, this bad memory, فالمختلط, then that's the case of the muddled narration. So that's the one who he was precise, and then he lost his precision, like he lost his memory, or he lost his books. So whatever he narrated when he was precise, then that's acceptable. And whatever he narrated after he became muddled, then it's not acceptable. ومتى توبع سيء الحفظ بمعتبر, and whenever someone who has a bad memory is followed up by something that has regard, so all of that is mustalah right there. But look how it makes a nice sentence. So whenever something is followed up, whenever the one with a bad memory is followed up by something that has regard, so the tabi' is the follow-up, and the i'tibar, the regard, that's putting the narrations together, comparing them. Whenever the one with the bad memory is followed up by what has regard, وَكَذَا الْمَسْتُورِ, and likewise, that one who has some people who narrate from him, but he's not verified. The mastur, we didn't translate it last time. Veiled. Mastur. Review that, inshallah. And also the mursal. What's the mursal? The mursal is the one where we don't know who's missing between the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam and the tabi'i. If this one is followed up also by something that has regard, wal mudallas, and also that trickster, the one who manipulates the chain without lying, also if he's followed up by something that has regard. So anytime the one with the bad memory, or the one who two people narrated from him, for example, but he's not confirmed, or the narration when we don't know who's between the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam and the follower of the companion, or the narration of the one who does tadlis, trickery in the chain. He says, from so-and-so, and he gives the impression that he's narrating something that he heard from that one, when he never heard it from that one. And according to Ibn Hajar, he even met that one. So whenever any of these cases are followed up by something that has regard, صار حديثهم حسنا, then their hadith would become fair. لا لذاته, not by itself. بل بالمجموع, rather by the totality. So one of the things we can take away from what we just said now and what we said before is that sometimes you say hadith and it means a single narration. And sometimes you say hadith and it means an incident, for example, that might have several narrations, like the hadith of the slave girl. So that's what we're talking about here. The hadith became hasan, not by itself, so it must be a totality that's hasan. ثم الإسناد إما أن ينتهي إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Then, now he changes the subject. He's finished talking about the criticism of the narrator. Then, the chain would either end at the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, tasriha, explicitly, like to say, the Messenger of Allah said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, so that's explicit. أو hukman, or virtually, meaning in judgment. It's a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, like when a companion would say, we were commanded to do such and such. That's judged as a prophetic hadith. من قوله أو فعله أو تقريره, whether a saying of his alayhi salatu wassalam, or an action, or an approval. Yani all of those are hadiths. What he said, that's a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, a prophetic hadith. What he did and what he approved, meaning something happened in his presence and he didn't object. That's a hadith of the Prophet too, alayhi salatu wassalam. أو إلى الصحابي كذلك, or a report could end at a companion likewise, yani explicit or virtually. However, the companion doesn't have the same judgment concerning approval. So a report could be a report of a companion, what he said or what he did, but if something were done in his presence and he was silent, that's not a proof. That's for the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And similar to that is for a person to, a person can't say, well, when I did such and such thing, the sheikh was there. That won't be a proof. He has to ask about what he's doing. وَهُوَ مَنْ لَقِيَ النَّبِيِّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ مُؤْمِنًا بِهِ. And he, the companion, is who met the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, even if he couldn't see, believing in him, yani before leaving him, he was a believer. وَمَاتَ عَلَى الْإِسْلَامِ, and he died upon Islam. وَلَوْ تَخَلَّلَتْ رِدَّةٌ فِي الْأَصَحِ, even if apostasy came in between, according to what's most accurate. So if someone didn't meet the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, then he's not a sahabi. It's not enough to live at his time. And if he was a kafir when he left the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, and then became a believer away from him, and then he's not a companion. He has to come and meet him as a believer. So even if apostasy came in between, if he was a companion and then he committed apostasy and then he came back to Islam and he's still a companion, his apostasy will not remove his status of suhbah, according to what's correct. So here, we're not going into details. We're not mentioning names or stories. We're just reading through the text. أو إلى التابعي, or the chain could end at the follower. وهو من لقي الصحابي كذلك, and he's the one who likewise met the companion. Yani, like the companion is the one who met the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the tabi'i is the one who met the sahabi. And he was a Muslim, but they differed about some details, like if he has to be like accompany him or be like a colleague of his, or if it's enough to be in his session, for example. For the Sahaba, it's enough for them to be there in the session with the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Like if the Prophet was there, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and there's people, all the people are there, and they are like there with him, then those are his Sahaba, those Muslims. فالأول, so the first of those, al-marfu', raised up to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. وَالثَّانِي الْمَوْقُوفِ, the second one is stopped at the companion. وَالثَّالِثُ الْمَقْطُوعِ, and the third one is cut off at the follower. وَمَنْ دُونَ التَّابِعِيِّ فِيهِ مِثْلُهُ, and whoever is beneath the follower in the chain is like the follower, meaning that's called maqtu' also. وَيُقَالُ لِلْأَخِيرَيْنِ الْأَثَرُ, and it is said about the last two reports, those two are called al-athar, the athar. Athar means trace. Wal-musnad, so what do we have now? We have hadith attributed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, that's marfu', a report. You could call it a hadith attributed to the companion, and maqtu', the report, you're not going to call it a hadith, attributed to the tabi'i, but you could call it an athar. And the one that comes from the companion, you can call it an athar too. And up until here, we're just talking about what's attributed to what. And we're not talking about if the chain is connected. Now we're going to talk about that. He says, وَالْمُسْنَدُ مَرْفُوعُ صَحَابِي بِسَنَدٍ ظَاهِرُهُ الْاتصَّالِ. The musnad is a companion's elevated narration. It's what a companion of all people is attributing to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with a chain that what appears from this chain is that it's connected. There could be a sahabi between the sahabi and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. At that point, it doesn't matter. A sahabi reporting from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam directly, but what he heard through an intermediary who's another sahabi, that doesn't matter. That's why it's important to define the mursal report correctly. Not to define mursal as with the follower, when the follower drops the companion and reports from the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Rather, mursal is a report in which the intermediary between the Prophet and the tabi'i is unknown. Difference is, if you say the tabi'i dropped the companion out the chain, then that means you know who's in the chain. And you know this one is a companion. And if you know this one is a companion, then it doesn't matter. So that's why you have to, that's clear? So that's why you have to define the mursal properly. فَإِنْ قَلَّ عَدَدُهُ. Now, if the chain's number of narrators is few, فَإِمَّا أَنْ يَنْتَهِيَ إِلَى النَّبِيِّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. Then either this chain ends at the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, أو إلى إمام ذي صفة عالية, or the chain ends at an imam with a high description. كشعبة, like Shu'bah. So now we're talking about the number of people in the chain. A lot or a little bit, there's a question. To whom? So if it's to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that's a case. If not to the Prophet, it might be then to someone significant, like a massive imam. So then there's a chain to this imam from someone. So is there a lot of people there in that chain or a little bit? Then he says, the chain then would either end at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or at an imam who has a high description, like Shu'bah. High description is like great memorization and mastery of fiqh and precision and having authoring and other things like that. Things that give that one preponderance. We said like Shu'bah and like Malik and Ash-Shafi'i and others. فالأول العلو المطلق والثاني النسبي. So the first case, when there's a few narrators in the chain from the person in question to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that's absolutely high chain. And the second case, when there's few people in the chain back to a notable imam, then that's relatively high chain. وفيه الموافقة وهي الوصول إلى شيخ أحد المصنفين من غير طريقه. And in this chapter that we're discussing now, there's the case of muwafaqah. Muwafaqah means compliance or matching. It is for someone in his own chain to arrive at the sheikh, of one of the authors, not through the chain of the author. Through his own chain, he gets back to one of the sheikhs of the authors. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about comparing chains of narration, the numbers of people in the chain. So if we say there are fewer narrators or more narrators, that means there must have been a comparison. So the one with fewer is higher, and the one with more is lower. So that's the case to understand first the number of people in a chain. Now, he just built on that. And he's saying, if you understand that, then understand that, well, those authors of those hadith books, aren't they putting hadiths and giving their chains? So that means they're telling you who their sheikhs are. Okay, so if you're also someone who deals in hadiths, so you have your own chains, maybe you're not an author though. So maybe your chain gets back to the sheikh of someone who authored a book. So there's a divergence in the chain, in other words. You're not getting to his sheikh through him, you're getting to his sheikh through your own chain. That's clear? Remember that you could have your own chain of narration. And so you narrate whatever you narrate. And Al-Bukhari has his own chain of narration. He narrates whatever he narrates. So he authored his Sahih al-Bukhari. You might have a hadith with your own chain. You trace it all the way back. And then you say, hey, this is a hadith in Bukhari. I have a hadith that's in Bukhari, but it's not Bukhari's version, though. It's your own chain. Not through him. You understand? You have a chain back to his sheikh, not through him. So it means you have your own chain. So then Al-Bukhari, he's someone who has a position in the chain. His sheikh before him has a position in the chain. You got to his sheikh, not through him. So from here, start comparing chains. How did somebody get to someone else? He says, وَفِيهِ الْبَدَلِ. Also, this case, this chapter about the number of people in the chain has the case called badal, which is replacement or switch. وَهُوَ الْوُصُولُ إِلَى شَيْخِ شَيْخِهِ كَذَلِكَ. That's when your chain gets to the sheikh of his sheikh, not through him. وَفِيهِ الْمُسَاوَاةِ. And also this has the case of equality. وهي استواء عدد الإسناد من الراوي إلى آخره مع إسناد أحد المصنفين. That's for there to be the same number of people in the chain from the narrator, person who has his own chain, all the way back. وهي استواء عدد الإسناد من الراوي إلى آخره. It is the equal number of the chain from the narrator all the way to the end. مع إسناد أحد المصنفين. Equal to the chain of one of the authors. His chain is equal in number of narrators to the chain of one of the authors. وفيه المصافحة. And also this chapter has the case of musafaha, the handshake. وهي الاستواء مع تلميذ ذلك المصنف. And that is to be equal, to line up with the student of the author. For your chain to line up with the student of an author. وَيُقَابِلُ الْعُلُوَّ بِأَقْسَامِهِ النُّزُولِ. And the highness of the chain, which is the few number of narrators, the comparatively fewer number of narrators. What's contrary to it, with all of its divisions, we just said so many subdivisions there, is an-nuzul, is the low chain. So the low chain, that's the one with more numbers. Substitution, yeah, could be for badal. MashaAllah. So this is what we covered today. He says, ثُمَّ الْبِدْعَةُ إِمَّا بِمُكَفِّرٍ. Furthermore, the bid'ah, the heresy, is either going to be for what demands a charge of blasphemy, أو بمفسق, or what only demands that he be a major sinner. So we're talking about here criticism of the narrator. Who's this narrator here? We're Muslims, so we're not going to narrate from a kafir, our religion. So, but not everyone is agreeing about what's right in Islam. So some people said one way is right in Islam, and some other people said a different way, another way is right in Islam. Like they might say, who are you to have a monopoly on everything? It's your claim that something is right in Islam. And I'm a Muslim, and I believe in Allah and His Messenger, and I have hadiths with their chains of narration. So if he's a kafir, we're not accepting his narration. If he's not a kafir, then he's a Muslim. If he's a Muslim, so does he have then some bad belief? Maybe. If he does, he'd be a major sinner. فَالْأَوَّلُ لَا يَقْبَلُ صَاحِبَهَا الْجُمْهُورِ. The first one who's kafir, the majority doesn't accept. That's the case. That's correct judgment. We don't narrate religion from kafir. وَالثَّانِي يُقْبَلُ مَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ دَاعِيَةً فِي الْأَصَحِّ. The second one, who's major sinner, he's accepted as long as he's not a propagator, according to what's most accurate. That means he doesn't argue for his bid'ah, and he doesn't call people to it. إِلَّا إِرَّوَى مَا يُقَوِّي بِدْعَتَهُ. Unless he narrates what strengthens his heresy. Yani, that's what's left. So if he's kafir, we're not going to take from him. If he's a propagator, we're not going to take from him. So he's neither of those, and he's been accused of some bad beliefs. His beliefs are in his heart. Outwardly, he's a good Muslim, and he masters his lesson. So is there any reason left for not taking his narration? Yes, if he narrates what strengthens his bid'ah. So basically, if he's accused of being a Shiite, and then he's narrating things about Ahlul Bayt, then not going to accept it from him. فَيُرَدُّ عَلَى الْمُخْتَارِ. So that one is rejected according to what's chosen. وَبِهِ صَرَّحَ الْجَوْزَجَانِي شَيْخُ النَّسَائِي. And Al-Jawzajani, the Shaykh of An-Nasa'i, was explicit about that. ثُمَّ سُوءُ الْحِفْظِ. Then there's bad memory. إن كان لازما فهو الشاذ على رأي. If it's bound to the person, that's his normal case, then that's irregular narration. His narration is a shadh one, according to an opinion. أو طارئ, and if it's not his normal case, so maybe he got old, maybe he got sick, for example. فالمختلط, then that's mixed up narration. It's said that the one who memorizes the Quran would not become like this. وَمَتَى تُوبِعَ السَّيِّئُ الْحِفْظِ بِمُعْتَبَرٍ. And whenever someone with a bad memory is followed up by something considered. So we're talking about here al-i'tibar, we're talking about the shahid and the tabi', when you have narrations with similar meaning, whether the source of the difference is from the companions, then that's shahid, or if the difference is somewhere that diverged in the chain, then that's tabi', and putting those together, comparing the chains for this purpose, that's i'tibar, that's regard. So whenever someone with a bad memory is followed up, tabi' by a mu'tabar, some regard, and likewise, al-mastur, the one he has two narrators, at least, but he's not approved. What's lower than him? What's lower than him is the one who has one narrator. He's unknown. This one who has one narrator from him, he's unknown. Someone might have two narrators from him. Now he's not unknown, but is he approved? If he's not approved, then he's mastur, he's veiled. Someone might maybe say invisible. So if this one is followed up also by something that has regard, wal mursal, and the one in which someone's missing between the follower and the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, when that one is followed up by what has regard, wal mudallas, and the manipulated chain, also when that one's followed up, because the follow-up here is going to make us confident about what we were afraid of. So then we knew that the one with the bad memory, he remembered this time. And also that this veiled one or invisible one, his narration is compliant. And that this one that we don't know who's between the Prophet and the companion and the tabi'i, also it's compliant. And that this one that came from someone who manipulates the chain, that he didn't manipulate it here. صار حديثهم حسنا لا لذاته. Their hadith becomes fair not by itself. Fair by something else. بل بالمجموع. Fair by the totality. ثم الإسناد إما أن ينتهي إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Then the chain would either end at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now here, you need to pay attention to something that the author did. He talked about the chain. He started talking about the chain here. Then the chain would either end at the Prophet, and then he's going to say, or it ends at the companion. Then he's going to say, or it ends at the tabi'i. Then he's going to say, so the first one is marfu', and the second one is mawquf, and the third one is maqtu'. But to be marfu' or mawquf or maqtu' doesn't have to have a chain of narration. It doesn't have to have a chain of narration. So right here he starts talking. ثُمَّ الْإِسْنَادِ, then the chain of narration. Then he's going to keep flowing until he winds up saying marfu', mawquf, maqtu'. So maybe somebody might not pay attention there. And then he'll think that to be marfu', elevated to the Prophet, needs to have a chain of narration. Just flowing with his words here. You follow me? Alhamdulillah. Or mawquf or maqtu'. So that's not the case. So he says here, then the isnad is either going to end at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tasrihan, explicitly, or hukman, or virtually, min qawlihi, or fi'lihi, or taqririhi, whether it's his saying, or his doing, or his approval. Some people say tacit approval means he didn't say anything. Oh, ila sahabi, or it would end at the companion, kadhalika, it would likewise end at the companion. وَهُوَ مَنْ لَقِيَ النَّبِيَّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ مُؤْمِنًا بِهِ. He's the one who met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, believing in him, also under normal circumstances, not under supernatural circumstances. So Jibreel is not a companion of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, because meeting an angel is supernatural, and the prophets who met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the night of Al-Isra wal Mi'raj, they are not companions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, because that was a supernatural encounter. وَهُوَ مَنْ لَقِيَ النَّبِيَّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ مُؤْمِنًا بِهِ. He's the one who met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, believing in him. وَمَاتَ عَلَى الْإِسْلَامِ, and he died upon Islam. وَلَوْ تَخَلَّلَتْ رِدَّةٌ فِي الْأَصَّحِ, even if apostasy came in between, according to what's most accurate. Or it ends at a tabi'i, and he's the one who met a companion likewise, according to whatever details they differed about them. And so the first is marfu', although it doesn't have to have a chain of narration to be marfu', just is attributed to the Prophet to be marfu'. And the second is mawquf. It's enough to be attributed to the companion, doesn't have to have a chain of narration. And the third is maqtu', also doesn't have to have a chain of narration though. وَمَنْ دُونَ التَّابِعِيِّ فِيهِ مِثْلُهُ, and whoever is below the tabi'i in that he's like the tabi'i, meaning his narration is called maqtu' too. وَيُقَالُ لِلْأَخِيرَيْنِ الْأَثَرِ, and the last two can be called the athar. وَالْمُسْنَدُ مَرْفُوعُ صَحَابِي بِسَنَدٍ ظَاهِرُهُ الْاِتِّصَالِ. The musnad is a companion's elevating the hadith to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam with a chain that appears to be connected. فَإِنْ قَلَّ عَدَدُهُ, if such a chain has a few number, that means there must be a comparison there. فإما أن ينتهي إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أو إلى إمام ذي صفة علية, then either it ends at the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام or at an imam with a high status, كشعبة, like شعبة. فالأول العلو المطلق والثاني النسبي. So the first one is absolutely high, has few numbers back to the Prophet. The second one is relatively high, few numbers back to some significant imam. And then there's different cases under here. We don't need to repeat those. We need to study those, me too, and review those and let that be clear, inshallah ta'ala. Maybe when we come back and read the sharh, we'll focus there and make sure we understand it well. No questions because we need to pray Maghrib, inshallah ta'ala.